The skill set that I was blessed with was to throw the ball, from a young age. And so, injuring my throwing shoulder and really going through a lot of challenges trying to figure out how to come back with that and regain my skill set was challenging. And candidly, I never really did. As a player, I never really returned to form, I guess you'd say, but always chasing that, right? Always chasing what I thought I was capable of and chasing the opportunity to try to go out and prove that.
Welcome to another episode of the Hey Where'd You Go podcast. I'm your host, Colin Kushner. The goal of my podcast is to catch up with former high school, collegiate, and professional athletes, showcasing what they are doing today. This week's guest was one of the top quarterback recruits in the country. He played quarterback at Michigan, played with Bill Belichick and Tom Brady in New England, and now he works in commercial real estate at CBRE up in the San Francisco Bay Area. Please welcome Matt Gutierrez. How's life up in the Bay Area, and how are you doing, especially during these crazy times?
Considering, my family's remained healthy and I've remained healthy, so very thankful for that. Definitely aware of what's going on and feeling the impacts in the community, throughout the Bay Area.
I want to take listeners from the very beginning of your life. You were born and raised in Concord, California. What was life like growing up in the town of De La Salle?
My parents introduced me to sports when I was really young. My dad's a big sports fan, and so I was kind of indoctrinated into that world, probably as a toddler. 5, 6 years old, my dad would take me to the games on Friday nights, and being in the stands and sitting with families and hearing the passion and exuberance that they had for the players and the program. And there was just really a great energy around it. And even sitting here talking about it, I kind of get some chills. I can think about some of the guys that I watched play and, guys that, maybe you would know and most of them you never heard of, but I can remember watching them and thinking, what great players they were, and hearing their parents, passionately cheering for them. It was just a great experience for me, and it was kind of the beginning of, my interest in football and really kind of setting a vision for myself. 5, 6 years old, thinking, man, this would be really cool to be a part of one day.
Did you ever think that one day you'd be the starting quarterback there, you would never lose a game, and you'd win a couple state titles along the way?
I'm not sure about all the wins and that piece of it, but definitely very early started, visualizing and seeing myself as a member of the team. And, in quarterback, I don't really remember exactly, when I became interested in quarterback. I played the position since I started playing football. But I always did see myself, one day being a Spartan and being out there on the field.
When you describe where you're from, Concord, East Bay, again, people from outside California probably don't understand what it's like over there, especially with such a prestigious school and football program. How would you best explain the town where you grew up?
For the Bay Area, it's somewhat of a, it's not one of the bigger cities, right? It's, just probably over 100,000 people. But I think, kind of being a part of the metro area, you have a mix of feeling like, hey, we're part of the Bay Area. We can, it's populated. We can be in Oakland. We can be in San Francisco, Silicon Valley very quickly. A blue collar type of feel, a lot of hardworking folks, which, I've definitely described my parents that way. And, I think some of those values, bled into me just by osmosis, being around my family and, their friends group. And, it was a great upbringing, just being a part of the community and, vibrant youth sports scene. And, I feel thankful to this day to have had the opportunity to grow up in the Bay Area and particularly that part of the Bay Area.
When most people think about the San Francisco area and its surrounding cities and towns, Silicon Valley, right? Big tech, lots of money, and so it is interesting that you say it was kind of a more blue collar area, and there are some discrepancies in values. How did that kind of mold you along the way?
Like you said, there's some more, shinier parts of the economy or things that get a little bit more notoriety in terms of the tech world in the Valley. And even, San Francisco is a global city, right? You go and take part in anything there, and you're going to be shoulder to shoulder with people from all around the world, which is, a whole other part of the experience. But for me, it was more around my father worked at the oil refinery in our town there for 32 years. My mother worked for the Contra Costa County where Concord's located. And if I go down the line of, a lot of my family members and their friends, a lot of, firemen, policemen, those type of jobs. So, and not only one job, right? There was times where my dad was, basically doing the equivalent of two jobs at the refinery, and started a side construction business, to help get me through De La Salle. So, I appreciate it more now as I'm older, some of those things. But then it was just like, hey, this is what needs to be done, and this is what my parents are doing to provide for me and my brother and try to give us, the best opportunities that they could.
When you look back at your tenure at De La Salle, all the wins, the state titles, you're so humble about it. What's the most memorable moment for you in particular from those high school years?
It's really tough to pin one down, especially because I was lucky enough to get to play as a sophomore, and, each team kind of has its own identities and obstacles to overcome. And we had graduated quite a bit of talent, and we knew we had a lot of good players, but we didn't have as many big name players or recruits as the year before. And we were lined up to play Long Beach Poly, I think the 5th game of the year. And, it turned out that going into the game, they had us ranked number 1 and number 2 in the country. And I think the game was nationally televised. And so that was just really a great experience for me as a high school kid, and for my team, for all of us as high school kids. And I don't know if you remember the prowess of Poly at that time, but there was probably, 20, 30 Division I prospects on that team and multiple NFL players. I think at the time they had the most NFL alumni out of any high school in the country. So
they were stacked, Matt. Growing up in Southern California, you heard about the Long Beach Polys in the modern day, and I'm looking like this is a glorified NFL team that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just talking to somebody yesterday and kind of recounting a little bit of it, and thinking that one of the guys, Mercedes Lewis, who was a big star on their team, is actually still playing, which is really cool to see. I believe he is. So yeah, there was just, a ton of talented guys on the field and a ton of pageantry around the game. We came down and played at the Veterans Stadium in Long Beach, so it was kind of a home game for them. And just, definitely just remember the energy throughout, in the stadium, and celebrities, on the field, surrounding the field. And it was a big game, but it still had a high school feel, in a sense of people were so interested, and, the barbecue, smoke from the barbecue going up, around the stadium. It was really just an awesome environment. And then, getting into the game, we were, if you looked at it on paper, we were overmatched in a lot of ways. And, halftime, our guys were gassed. We had guys going both ways, especially on the line.
Oh my God.
Some of the guys are outweighed by 100 pounds, I think our center was maybe 185 that year. And there was guys across from him that were, 3 bills plus that were eventual NFL players, guys that played at SC. And so we go in at halftime and guys are totally drained. I mean, you look at him and go, how's this guy going to finish the second half? And I don't even know how. The guys dug deep and we figured out a way to pull it out. And they were running all over us. Herschel Dennis, a USC guy, eventually was running all over us in the second half. And I only played one way, so I spent a lot of time on the sideline hoping and wishing that we were going to get back on the field. But it was just it was one of those things in sports where you just feel lucky to be a part of it when it's over, right? When you come out on top, and you think about the effort that all of my teammates, my close friends put out, and it was just really, really a cool thing to be a part of. And I can look back and remember just the satisfaction of the coaches, almost like they were surprised that we actually were able to, guys were able to dig that deep and compete for that long against such a good team.
Isn't it amazing though how you could be so gassed? And I never played. I just played club hockey. I never played anything higher than that. But there were moments where I'm just like, I don't know if I could do this. But if you kind of switch that mental mindset, it's like this little switch. And if you can do that, it pays off in a huge way. And obviously it shows when you go down and you're beating. I'm going to call Long Beach Poly. I'll call them a mini NFL team. Michigan, Notre Dame, Oregon, Tennessee, Florida, and I'm sure there are plenty more. Those are the schools I could find What was the recruiting process like for you, from your perspective, being a top prospect in the country?
I look back at that entire time. It was a lot of fun. It was really awesome to be a part of, and I got some exposure to that side of things kind of early in my career because I played with a guy named DJ Williams, who was the number one recruit in the country his senior year, and I was a sophomore, he was a senior, so there was a lot of days out at practice, where those recruiters or Haven head coaches from those schools would be out on our practice field, and it was a kind of a chance for all of us to show off our skills as well. And then I think it was the third game of the season that year. We played Mater Dei, and everyone was really geared up to stop DJ, which opened up the pass for us. And because I was a sophomore, nobody knew that De La Salle had a crew that could throw the ball, right? We were just known for running the veer and kind of being a powerhouse, disciplined team. So we were able to get the ball in there and have some success that way. And that kind of was the beginning of people, recognizing that maybe I had the potential to one day play college football. It didn't always go smooth, I think, because I had an injury when I was a junior. I played with a broken wrist in my throwing hand. And then with quarterback, there's, sometimes they need one guy in the class, sometimes they need two, sometimes they like somebody else they think is a better fit. So it started out with a pretty wide funnel, and then by the end it was, for one reason or another, it came down to just a couple with Oregon and Michigan. But it was an awesome experience, and really thankful, especially now that I had the opportunity to go away from home and be a student athlete and have that experience.
You're from the Bay Area, beautiful weather. It gets a little chilly in the wintertime, but nothing as cold as a Detroit winter, or an Ann Arbor winter, I should say. Why Michigan?
Well, let's be clear. I was a little bit naive about what it meant to survive a winter in the Midwest. Being a Bay Area kid, I had grown up enjoying the winters, right? When it gets down to about 55 degrees.
That's a winter for us, dude. 55 right. Is as cold as it gets.
Yeah. And I always loved, when we got a chance to drive up to Tahoe and experience the snow. So I thought, hey, I love the snow. It's no problem, right? But aside from that, Oregon's obviously a great school. There's tons of great opportunities out there for guys. But I really felt that Michigan had just a unique tradition in terms of the football program, in terms of the quarterback position. The guys that had kind of been through there for decades, really, and kind of set the bar for great quarterback play, and also for guys that would eventually go on to play in the NFL. And then coupled with that, a world-class education. And when it came down to it, I just felt like at that time, there really wasn't a better opportunity for me than that to get both of those in one place.
How important is factoring in the education side of things during the recruitment and committing process? Because I feel like so many focus on the football, basketball, hockey, whatever sport it is side, but then there's very little about the actual what you're going to go there and study and what you're going to do after football.
I don't think we could put enough emphasis on the educational piece for kids, or for young men or young women that are looking at these opportunities. And, just by the nature of things, because a lot of times as an athlete, you're approached from the athletic side, we tend to give that a little bit more weight because that's where we're seeing the opportunity come from, as opposed to, the other way around. And I think it's just, it's a tough decision because we're all ambitious, right? And we all have big dreams, and, you want to play in the biggest environment that you can with the most pageantry, and, maybe it's your dream school. But there's a perfect fit for everybody, I guess you could say, right? It's not one size fits all. And, what may be a great institution for me may not be a great institution for somebody else who maybe has different academic interests or something like that. So, I do some coaching and work with young athletes now, and we just always try to emphasize to them that, as hard as it is, try to have a vision of yourself, like you said, beyond your playing days, and for however long those last. We hope they last as long as they do in all these kids' dreams, but at some point it's going to end for all of us. And I think no matter how great of an education you're able to get or how much prestige is comes with that diploma, it's always going to be challenging to make that transition. And for me, I'm very grateful to have the alumni and the prestige of the University of Michigan behind me.
The first time you walked into the big house, what did that feel like to you?
It was amazing. It was amazing. I can remember our ride from the hotel, the first game when I was a freshman, riding through the streets of Ann Arbor and through all the tailgates and just seeing the energy that people had and the pageantry. It was a big contrast from at the time when I was in high school, late 90s, early 2000s, the Pac-10 at that time, the teams were struggling a little bit and a lot of them were down. It wasn't until my freshman year, I think, in college that Oregon went to the Fiesta Bowl and kind of came blasting on the scene. And USC went down to the Orange Bowl and beat Iowa down there with Carson Palmer and Justin Fargas and a ton of, great guys they had on that team. So maybe my timing was a little bit off by a year. But, I can remember going to Cal games at that time. And Stanford was actually, had some good years at that time as well. But, in the Pac, I just, there wasn't quite as much pageantry that I got to experience. And so when I went to the University of Michigan and there's 110,000 people and the entire community is totally, into it and supportive, it was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. It was pretty awesome.
That's what I try telling people, Matt. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love the Pac-12. I'm an Arizona State grad. Love the Pac-12, but it's just not the same. I mean, you compare it to like an SEC or a Big Ten. I don't really know how to describe it, but it's just so different, and there's such a big contrast. I just can't imagine walking on that field, 100,000 plus screaming fans in the freezing cold at 9 a.m. on a Saturday, and you're walking in there as an 18-year-old, and you're just. I hope you took it all in. I mean, the fact that you remember that bus ride is something that no one can ever take away, because I feel like those are the moments that people like myself love to hear from you guys. Those little pockets of time when you've been able to just dial everything back and just enjoy it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a unique experience. I think in the moment, you're kind of building up to that and working up to it for a lot of your life at that point, right? And so you feel a responsibility, but you also feel like, hey, this is what I do. And I have responsibilities, and I'm here with my teammates, and we're going in this thing to compete and win. But definitely now, looking back, I have a different appreciation for what a great opportunity that was and what a unique experience it was to be a part of that.
Not getting a chance to start a game against Ohio State, does that bother you a little bit, or is that something where it's like, hey, you know what? Or do you continue to take that amazing approach?
We talked a little bit about, looking back or regrets or any of that. And I said there's no regrets. But the one thing that I do look back on and say, gosh, I wish I would have gotten a chance to do that or have that opportunity is to be out on the field with the guys that I came in with, my classmates, my teammates. And there's nothing like going out and competing with your buddies, right? Especially in an environment like that, representing your school. And, I had my role in the team and I, had roles in the game, but to be the guy out there under center would have been really cool. And I think that there would have been, it would have been a lot of fun to go out there and compete on the field alongside my teammates, my friends, against Ohio State. And, the other part of it is a guy like Troy. I knew Troy back in high school. We went to, Elite 11 camp together. So it was awesome to get to see him out there, even though I think he took us 2 or 3 times. And really, I mean, the guy was phenomenal, right? He had some huge games against us, fourth quarter comebacks, and it would have been really cool to get to go head to head with him, so to speak. But other than that, just being a part of it, like I said, was a great experience.
I know Troy Smith. I know he's a fantastic athlete, and nothing against him personally, but what he did against Michigan, Matt, would just what I'm doing now with my face. I was like a little kid, and I'm thinking, I'm looking at my dad. I'm like, we got this. We're gonna beat Ohio State. Then Troy Smith does his thing, and the next thing you know, I'm upset for 10. When you're a kid, you're upset for 10 minutes, and then you're fine. You stay there for 4 years. You grind it out. You wait for your opportunities. You were pegged to be the starter in 2004. An injury happens. You get surgery, Henny takes over, and Henny kind of took it from there. How did you stay positive, and what was your mindset to stay and to grind it out?
Coming from my parents and my family, they were extremely supportive. I think they helped me realize there is a great value in being at the University of Michigan and continuing to get my education there. That was a huge part of it. And the other piece is, in my family and also being a part of De La Salle, you just always try to be positive and optimistic about whatever the situation is. Injuries are a part of sports, and having grown up a sports fan, you're always reading stories or hearing stories about guys overcoming these situations. And I just felt like, hey, this is something that happened. It's unfortunate, but I'm gonna stick with it and come back and compete. And I always believed in myself, and I think the support of my teammates was really important as well. And it was a tough situation. These are always tough situations for guys when they're battling, and you're at a great program like Michigan. There's always going to be somebody that's as good or better coming for your spot. At that time, the transfer frenzy wasn't quite as crazy, and because of the way the rules were set up, right? At that time, you couldn't go laterally. You would have to go down to 1AA, and if you wanted to play right away. And I just felt like, I want to keep giving this a crack, and I'm thankful that I did. Maybe if the situation was a little bit different or things were the way they are now, maybe I would have looked at it differently. But no regrets looking back as far as sticking around.
How important is it to have that mindset, the grinded out mindset? Because again, people just don't do that anymore. It's like, oh, this isn't working. Like, let's pull the chute and get out. And I think that's wrong. I don't really know what you learned from that.
I think every situation is different. I definitely agree that there is a lot of value in, trying to develop some resiliency and sticking things out. There's a lot to be learned from it. And, you see situations all the time where, guys stick it out. And again, it's football, right? Or any sport. There's, guy stubs their toe and you're right back in there. So that scenario never really played out for me. And it's always tough to lose an opportunity or miss an opportunity due to injury. And then you're sitting there, saying, what, am I going to hope for my buddy to get his shoelace come untied so I can go back in? But that's a part of life, right? And, recognizing, what your role is on a team at a given time and trying to do that the best you can. There's a ton of value in that as well. Quarterbacks are a little bit unique because only one plays at a time. And so when I look at some of these guys that jump ship quickly and they have another opportunity lined up to play, I think there's some validity to looking at those opportunities as well, especially if it's a guy that really has prospects of playing beyond college. It's situation to situation. And for me, I just I think at the time it was the right thing to do was stay around.
When you're that high of a prospect and you're playing with so many guys, the NFL is obviously on your radar. How did you factor in NFL aspirations and then just working hard, and the chips just not falling in your favor?
Looking back, I don't think I really recognized how much talent I had and what my prospects really were. In some ways, it's I joke with my buddies because, we coach now and I feel like we have to be very positive with the kids, right? They respond a different way. And there was kind of maybe a threshold or a turning point somewhere. I like to think is maybe back in 2007 when the iPhone came out. Social media started going nuts, but I look back and I feel like a lot of the coaching that I got was hard coaching, right? It was like, hey, the expectation is to do it right and to win. And if you don't, here's what you need to do to get better. And so a lot of the focus was always on like, oh, I got to get better. I got to shore this up or change this or improve this. And I think that's a very valuable mindset to have as well, right? Just continuous improvement and always pushing yourself to get better. And with that mindset, I was never really thinking too much about playing in the NFL. I just assumed that, hey, if I do what I need to do here and I continue to improve, that will take care of itself.
And that's the perfect mindset to have, right? Because, what else can you do? It's already taxing enough mentally and physically. And so if you just hunker down, put the blinders on, and do your job and do everything you can do, no matter what happens, you could always leave without any regret, so to speak. Would you say that that's kind of how you look back on your Michigan career?
I totally agree with you. I think it's really, it can be counterproductive to think about anything but the moment and how you can improve your own game and how you can bring value to your team. The one kind of, I guess, sidebar to that is, as a coach now, any kids that I work with, especially if they have unique gifts, I try to tell them, hey, you have a unique skill set, especially if a guy is really passionate about the game. And, I've been around one of, if not the greatest quarterback of all time, as a teammate and played with a lot of other great players. And so I feel like I have enough exposure to that to kind of recognize guys that have something unique about them. And I always want them to know that, right? Because again, hopefully that's the mindset they take for themselves as far as, always wanting to improve and kind of never having it be good enough. But in the back of their mind, I always want them to know in case times get tough or, a roadblock comes up, like, hey, I really am a talented guy. And I want them to know and believe in the value of their ability without anybody else having to tell them, right? Because sometimes you're in those situations and people are down on you or, nobody sees that ability in you. And the only person you can rely on is yourself.
But during your time at Michigan, dude, I mean, Braylon Edwards, Sean Crable, Lamar Woodley, Chad Henne, John Navarre, who I think I told you when we chatted previously, I love the dude because he would just drop back and just chuck that thing downfield. Whether it was a completed pass or not, I was just goo goo gaga at the TV.
You named some great athletes and some really great, great guys, great teammates, great friends, and the list goes on. Of guys that you know of and guys that maybe you never heard as much about. So much talent on our teams in my 4 years there. And, I was fortunate to have some experience after college playing. And there was a lot of guys there that could have had that opportunity, maybe should have had that opportunity. And for whatever reasons, it didn't work out. But, just a ton of talented guys on the team and a lot of great guys too. I don't know what other guys say, but I always feel like Michigan was a little bit unique in that, we didn't really have anybody on the team that rushed fraternities for the most part. The team kind of was our fraternity and, it kind of made for a unique experience.
That sounds like such a blast. I think when everyone just kind of unites and comes together, I mean, think about it. Everyone's together. You got the Wisconsin game, the Ohio State game, which I want to get into later. I want to chop it up with you about our love for Ohio State as we put that in quotation marks. You did your 4 years at Michigan. You graduated. And then you go to Idaho State. What did that opportunity present for you?
Going back to earlier in the conversation where we were talking about, the ease of making moves nowadays with the new rules and the transfer portal and all that, it was a little bit less common for guys to move around. And really, I was just looking for somebody that needed a quarterback coming from Michigan and that, conference and that level of play. I didn't really know much about a lot of the schools that were at the 1AA level. So it was kind of a scramble for my parents and myself to try to figure out a place and talk to some coaches. And, Idaho State was a great opportunity for me. We had a ton of talent on the team. Loved the guys that were coaching, had some really neat guys coaching. And, going into it, we were as optimistic as ever. And, we didn't end up converting on that in the win column. Just having the opportunity to get out on the field and compete and play college football was awesome.
So you didn't have Idaho circled up on your giant map. You didn't say, "Hey, Mom and Dad, one day this is where I'm going, and this is where you're gonna have to come visit me."
Hey, not in a million years. I mean, I didn't know of Pocatello, Idaho until we started looking at it.
When did you know that the NFL was a possibility? Because like you talked about before, looking back on it, you even say that you didn't even realize at the time the talent that you had.
I feel like I kind of just knew and relied on what I was hearing from the coaches, even though there was times where we weren't winning games or, there was a couple games where we didn't put up a lot of points, but scouts were still coming through, showing interest in me and other guys on our team. And the coaches would share some of the feedback and say, hey, these guys like you. Here's the qualities they see in you. Here's some things they think you can improve on. And I knew at least guys were giving me a look. And I think that's all you can ask for is get a look and get an opportunity, and then it's on you to do what you can with it.
I feel like eventually the opportunities do come, and it did. You signed with New England as a free agent. What was that moment like for you? Bill Belichick, Tom Brady, fellow Bay Area guy, also went to Michigan. What was it like being with those guys, soaking up everything that they know?
Hard to put into words what an awesome opportunity that was for me and what an awesome experience it was. I was the type of guy and kid that I was very exuberant about football. I loved it. I loved to compete. I loved the physical part of the game, but I also loved the mental part of the game. And so you go to a place like New England, there's no stone unturned. And I always say I felt like I had a lot of great instruction and coaching when I was at Michigan, and I learned a ton about football on top of what I had learned at De La Salle, which was a great foundation. Coach Belichick and the rest of that staff, that organization, it's first class. And when you have an opportunity to be a part of it, you really understand why they've had the success that they have. They just take things to an entirely different level. Which was a blast for me. Some people, I think it's an intense environment and there's a high bar, right? There's a high expectation there, and maybe it doesn't always feel so happy-go-lucky and fun, but I loved it. I loved every minute of it. It was awesome.
Did you and Tom ever go back and forth? You went to Sarah, you went to De La Salle. Was there ever a little banter, maybe a little smack talk along the way?
I wouldn't say that, but we did talk about our common roots, being in the Bay Area and going to Michigan. A lot of common threads, and I'm sure you heard he's just a great dude, right? Really down to earth guy, and so a lot of conversations about some of those things we had in common.
That's so cool, and it's just so crazy the small world. Both from the Bay Area, both went to Michigan, both on the Patriots. You were there for a little while, and I know you were there the year that I know you're not gonna be happy about this, but it's the year that David Tyree for the Giants had that sensational grab to end. That was the perfect season year, right? With Randy Moss and everybody. How heartbreaking was that moment for you?
If I'm being honest, having been a free agent, kind of taking the path that I had taken, I didn't have the mindset that I was lucky to be there. Where I really felt a letdown and some disappointment was for some of those veteran guys that had amazing careers, let alone the guys on our team that had already won championships with New England. But you look at some of the great players like Randy and Junior Seau, and, they were playing late in their careers and having, had such a great season. And then to see us come up, just barely short of it, I think that was the toughest thing to watch, and experience that along with those guys and kind of know, hey, this guy's been chasing this for 10, 12, 15 years as a professional, and we're right on the cusp of it. And, this may have been the last shot for them. That was a tough part of it. One thing that I think, hopefully I'll remember always as I go throughout my life, I remember Coach Belichick coming in after the game, and there was like no discussion of what happened or why it happened, whose fault it was, what we didn't do well on the field. I just remember him essentially taking all the blame for us coming up short and saying, hey, I apologize. I wish, I could have done a better job to prepare you guys to win. And I thought, wow, with all the great players that we had, for him to come in and say that, it's never gonna make it okay that we lost. But I think that just says a lot about the organization and about his leadership.
I know your NFL journey had a lot of twists and turns. You're with New England. You went to Kansas City. You spent some time with the Bears. You also went over to the UFL, the AFL. It was a winding journey for you. Did you channel what happened at Michigan and take that same approach?
You develop kind of a thick layer of skin, right? And some armor, and you kind of keep that warrior mentality going. That's just how I think a lot of athletes view themselves. Like, hey, this is what I do. It's not always going to be smooth. You're dealing with failure every day. You're getting critiqued in ways that are so intimate and personal that, a lot of people may not be familiar or comfortable with that type of magnifying glass on you all the time. And so, if somebody says they don't like you or they fire you, they cut you, you just kind of keep marching. And it doesn't mean that it's not a letdown and disappointment. Doesn't hurt. You're pouring everything you have into it. But ultimately, I love to play. The skill set that I was blessed with was to throw the ball, from a young age. And so, injuring my throwing shoulder and really going through a lot of challenges, trying to figure out how to come back with that and regain my skill set was challenging, and candidly, I never really did. As a player, I never really returned to form, I guess you'd say, but always chasing that, right? Always chasing, what I thought I was capable of, and chasing the opportunity to try to go out and prove that. And even now, I've had some great opportunities in the business world and really enjoy things that I've done. But, what's better than playing ball? It's like being a kid and being able to, make a living, at times doing that was pretty awesome. And I think that, my mindset was, hey, I'd like to keep this going as long as I can, right?
Matt, at what point did you realize maybe it's time to kind of shift focus to the business world and life after football? But I know it's not as easy as that, because when you love something so much and you're in the environments like Michigan, New England, it's hard to walk away from that.
I haven't talked to too many guys that have made a clean break. Even if they have great success in their careers, it's kind of hard to transition, or I won't say always. Say challenging, right? It's there's no playbook for it, right? It's unique for each guy, and there's always challenges for anybody when we're going through a transition in life. So, but for me, I went and played in the Arena League. I had been cut at that point, I don't know, 7 or 8 times probably overall, and I was hoping that going to the Arena League and playing well, showing some things on film would get me another opportunity back in the NFL. I thought maybe. I was hearing some things that maybe that was going to come to pass, or maybe I'd get a chance to go into camp. And then the Arena League we played in the summertime, I ended up breaking a finger, having to have surgery. So I missed a handful of games. I came back. I think I played well maybe in my last game, but when I first came back, I had a couple, a rough start, maybe 2, getting my bearings back. And the opportunity just didn't come to fruition. And I kept on training maybe a year after that. But at that point, I was getting towards 30, and I realized, hey, as much as I love doing this, it's not really sustainable the way that I'm doing it now. If the trajectory is changing for me and it's not headed back towards, the NFL, I think hopefully I have some other abilities and capabilities in outside of football. And I thought, maybe it's time for me to start looking at those and trying to build my life, outside of the game.
Did you have any idea of the direction that you wanted to go? Because football, right, you're on this great path, right? And then all of a sudden that one path extends out to like millions of possibilities. Was that nerve-wracking for you, or was it kind of cool in a way because you have this whole world in front of you?
I think it's both, right? It's all of those in one. There's some excitement, some fear, some confusion. Am I doing the right thing at the right time? It's kind of all of those. And so I had an idea. I was always interested in business. So I knew I wanted to be in the business world. And, I had, gotten interested as during my playing career in some certain aspects of that, and finance and real estate, and, had been trying to dive in those a little bit on my own. And so I knew that's kind of the direction I wanted to pursue. I didn't know exactly what it was, but I knew it was, somewhere in that direction.
And you wanted to get back to California, right? I mean, you've had enough of those. What was worse, Matt? I got to ask you, Michigan winter in Ann Arbor or winter time in Foxborough?
Foxborough, I've never seen snow like that. We had some nor'easters come through and some big snowstorms, and I remember being out at practice and literally watching snow pile up on guys' shoulder pads, like just during a 5-minute period of practice, right? Michigan, the wind, there was times where the wind, you'd walk, I remember walking to class, and they never shut down class in Ann Arbor, right? Like, doesn't matter the weather you're going.
I don't get that, dude, because when it rains, when it would rain in Arizona, I'm like, can you guys just cancel class?
Yeah, no doubt. But yeah, I remember you'd walk with like a 45 degree lean into the wind to get across campus in Michigan. Yeah. So it was brutal at times. I always thought, I love the Bay Area. I really appreciated a lot of the things that it has to offer. I loved coming back home to visit family and friends, and I was fortunate. I got to experience a lot of great cities and parts of the country, but I always knew that I wanted to come back to the Bay Area.
Home is where the heart is. I think for the longest time as a Southern California guy, and don't hold that against me, Matt. I know there's a huge divide between Northern California and Southern California, and between us, I used to tell people, and they're like, "Where are you from?" When I lived up north, I was like, "I'm from California." They're like, "Oh, which part?" And then I would be like, "I don't know if we want to go down this road."
Yeah, I think it's definitely there's unique characteristics to all the different parts of California. We get a lot of attention in your area and up in the Bay Area, but there's so much to offer, and that's why as many challenges as we have and as many challenges are getting a lot of media time these days. There's still a lot of great people here and a lot of great things going on.
You want to be in business. You want to come back to the Bay Area. You worked in the tech world for a little while. Take me through the process to getting where you are now in commercial real estate at CBRE, which is a huge company.
Even getting to this opportunity was a little bit of a windy road. I came out of, playing and was fortunate to get to sit down and speak with a lot of people in the business world that, have had great successes and were willing to share some of that with me and spend some time. And, just being in the Bay Area, tech is a huge part of the economy and there's a lot of opportunities there. And especially for athletes, sales is a big part of any business. And so some people I got introduced to, offered an opportunity, and I knew that, that was probably something in whatever industry I was going to go into. You got to learn how to sell and learn how that process works. So I had a great experience working for a company out of London, and kind of in parallel, I was just done with the game and coaching with some of my high school buddies that also played in college and professionally, and were kind of wrapping up their careers as well. We were working with young high school kids in the area, and thinking about the instruction that we were giving, and also the environment that we were in with, technology and innovation all around us, and thinking about how we could kind of marry those two things and get information to people that maybe didn't have access to the coaching staff that we had put together. We got connected to a guy that, already kind of had a technology business going. And so that was another startup that I got involved with, where we were trying to use virtual reality technology, right around 14, 15, when that industry was really starting to pick up some steam again, and try to use that tech to develop a platform that would help guys train in football and other contact sports virtually without having to take the impact to their bodies and heads on a daily basis. And we had a great team. We had some financial backing and great opportunity. I think we were a little bit ahead in terms of we were using computer generated animations to create our simulation. And maybe the technology wasn't quite there as far as implementing for guys that were looking for something a little bit more realistic. And there's actually a company out now called Striver that was taking a little different approach, and they've had great success and are still going now.
You had so much success at De La Salle, one state titles, never lost. You go to Michigan, you work your butt off. Things don't exactly work out how you want. You go to Idaho State, you get the opportunity, then you go to the NFL. How have all those moments shaped you now on the business side of things?
Just the more experiences that we have, and, the more successes, the more failures, the more, in between outcomes, they're all learning experiences, right? And, you survive it and you're like, okay, well, I made it through that. It was painful, but, there's, what can I learn from it, and how can I apply that going forward? It's no different in commercial real estate, especially with what I'm doing and working on the advisory and transaction team and brokerage. It's very entrepreneurial and very competitive. We're in Silicon Valley. It's one of the most dynamic markets in the world, not to mention the entire Bay Area. So it's, you get that adrenaline going just like in sports and the competitive juices, but it's definitely challenging. And, I think, having the experience in sports, you're kind of, molded or, you kind of seek out situations like that, whether that's healthy or not, I don't know, but, but it's definitely exciting.
Take me through the day to day. What does a day in the life of Matt Gutierrez look like now on the commercial real estate side of things?
It's a lot like when I was playing sports. It's getting up early and, trying to take care of myself physically and mentally, just like, kind of like an athlete is how I think of it. And I've actually learned quite a bit from some of the more senior folks in my office, just observing how they take care of themselves and how active they are. And it can be a stressful situation, when you're competing and in that type of environment. So yeah, up early, trying to get the edge on the competition and get a head start on them, and then also just trying to be diligent. I think one of the biggest learning curves for me coming out of sports is that as an athlete, a lot of your stuff is planned out for you, right? I mean, I can remember these, basically booklets that were an itinerary every time you're going to go to an away game, or, you look at the practice week, at the beginning of the week, everything is laid out for you. You know where to be, and your job is to bring as much enthusiasm and energy as you can to that program. And, and now being in brokerage, I'm fortunate to work with, a lot of great professionals that are, kind of showed me and are continuing to show me how to do the business well. But as I said, a lot of it's entrepreneurial, and there's been a lot of learning as far as what to prioritize and kind of how to create that program for myself.
What are your personal goals over at CBRE?
Ultimately, it goes back to the mentality of sport, right? There is it's a competitive environment. It's a dynamic environment, which is a lot of fun. As you mentioned, I worked for a great company, largest real estate firm in the world, a global company. So there's a lot of great opportunities, and you get exposed to some really neat stuff with the clients that we service. But I think the mindset, is going back to sport, right? There is maybe some recognition, and there's awards in my business just like anything else, and people can, find a lot of success, but it's not going to be obtained or achieved without the day-to-day kind of blocking and tackling. And that's been the message to me from my colleagues since day one, and something that I can totally relate to, especially, having gotten the opportunity to play in programs like De La Salle in Michigan and the New England Patriots, where, all the accolades in the world, are on the walls of those organizations. But when you walk in there every day, it's, hey, what is the goal today? What's the task at hand? Not even like in the morning, what are we doing at 4 p.m.? It's like, what's right now? What do we need to focus on right now? And then after that's done, what's the next thing we need to focus on? And how can we just continue to stack those blocks up and build something that might be great?
Have you ever thought about it from this perspective, Matt? Let's just say at Michigan, Lloyd Carr's chewing you out, or in New England, Bill Belichick's chewing you out, and then you're in commercial real estate, you're on the business side of things now, and if you just have a bad day, or someone says they're having a bad day, have you ever just looked at them and been like, listen, you've never been chewed out by Lloyd Carr or Bill Belichick?
It's funny you say that, because, as many similarities as there are some pretty stark contrast from the business world and maybe what's acceptable on a football field, right? So yeah, I mean, hey, everything is relative, right? As we said earlier, in sport, you kind of get accustomed to being critiqued and maybe even, broken down or berated at times for shortcomings. Fortunately, so far, my colleagues in management at CBRE has had a little softer touch with me, but if it ever happens, I've had plenty of experience with it, so hopefully I'll be ready.
I think the only time, Matt, I could see somebody berating you is if you have a colleague and they went to that school in Ohio. I think it's called Ohio State or something. It's a program that we don't care about. But I feel like if someone says they're a Buckeye, then I feel like maybe there could be some tension. And I say that in the most sarcastic way possible. If you had to send a message to a young Matt Gutierrez, or young kids that you help out with today that are maybe going through something similar like you went through at Michigan and in the NFL, how would you help them, and what would you say?
I think the first thing is just to believe in yourself. Always believe in yourself. There's a lot going on, and it's a fast-paced game, right? It's about time, right? It's a young man's game, and you're trying to get as good as you can, as fast as you can, and take advantage of the opportunities that come your way. But sometimes there's some value in taking a step back and kind of analyzing the situation from maybe a little bit higher level. Maybe not just in the football world, but in the perspective of your life and where sport fits into that. And just keeping a perspective on things and saying, hey, this is something that I love to do. If you happen to be a professional and have an opportunity to make a living doing it, it's an amazing experience, and it can definitely be life-changing. But to just keep things in perspective. And I think, something that I've maybe evolved on as I've gotten away from the game is I think, you can probably apply the same intensity, to your sport and to your approach while having a little bit more of that perspective. And looking back, I know that, I can think back to conversations that I had with guys, and now I look back and I say, man, that guy was really wise. He wasn't even 30 years old, and he had a ton of success in his career and maybe overcame a bunch of things, but he was able to talk about, other interests and what he wanted to do after, and, where football fit into his life, and how he saw the opportunity and how he planned to take advantage of it. So, I always try to talk to the kids about, again, believing in themselves, understanding their talent, but also understanding how this opportunity is just, one part of your life. And, I think it should be viewed that way, as something that is just one piece of the puzzle.
And when people seem to classify athletes as they're an athlete, oh, they're a bust, or they're this, or they're that, I think the crazy part about it, Matt, is so many of you have so much success away from the game. And that's something that just, it doesn't seem to get talked about. It's like, okay, Matt Gutierrez, top prospect, went to Michigan. It just didn't work out. You did everything that you could, and it just didn't work. I don't consider that a bust by any means. I consider that doing what you're supposed to do in life, working your butt off, doing everything you can do. I just think it's important when that day does come and you do shift from athletics to the business world or whatever you end up doing, that you could be just as successful, if not more.
Absolutely. I think I think it goes back to your point about mindset, right? I mean, I've been lucky to be a part of some great organizations and be around great players, and then now being in the business world and have exposure to people that have had, unbelievably successful careers in business away from sports. And maybe they're former athletes, maybe former professional athletes, and many of them not, right? Maybe guys that just, are fans or played as kids. But there's common themes that I found that I hear applied throughout both of those worlds. And so I think it just goes back to those things of, maybe it's not as glamorous in terms of our culture and, what's on ESPN, but, if you look hard enough, you can find a lot of great examples of guys that have moved on and applied those traits that they learned as athletes and exercise as athletes, and now they're doing it in life. And, in a lot of ways, I think, man, sometimes it's great to hear those stories and see those stories as inspiration, right? That I don't have to be limited to having been an athlete or being an athlete. There's a world of possibility out there beyond sports, and I can choose to use sport if the opportunity is there, or if one day it's over, you can move on and be great at something else.
Do you miss football at all?
I'd be lying if I said no. I mean, I love to play. I love to compete, and I think one of the challenges for former athletes, and I'm not just talking about professional athletes, this is something that I've learned from guys that I work with after football. If you're a competitor, if you're a guy that likes to whether that's sport or playing cards or, whatever your vice is, it doesn't go away, right? When the opportunity leaves, it doesn't mean that passion goes away and that energy that you have to go out and compete goes away. So, interestingly enough, I hadn't played basketball in probably 2 years, just kind of letting my body rest and heal some things up. And just this year, I think going into the end of last year, a buddy of mine at work came to me and said, "Hey man, there's this great 3-on-3 basketball tournament the Warriors put on. I think it's Positive Coaching Alliance, a great cause. We get to go compete at their facility. Let's see if our company will sponsor us again this year." And so he talked me into it. We go out and like, hey, we got to go out and practice. So at lunch, we're going over to the local gym and getting a run in, trying to get in shape, with only a couple of weeks till the tournament. And I sprained my ankle, right? So then we go into this 3-on-3 tournament, and we're hobbling around. But I'll tell you what, just getting to do that with my colleagues and seeing how hard they competed and how much they wanted to win, even in this charity event, it was awesome to kind of get a little bit of that fix again. And then, we're always looking to find it different ways, right? We're a team or, getting outside and challenging ourselves, exercising, hiking, whatever other hobbies, we can get into. So I miss playing the game. I get a little bit of a fix coaching kids and trying to pass on. I feel like I was so fortunate to be exposed to some great coaches and players that gave me tools that I think can be applied from, an 8-9-year-old kid all the way up if they get to play professionally. And so, having a chance to pass on some of that experience and equip guys that may just, maybe give them a little boost to have some of the fun and experiences that I had is really fulfilling as well. It keeps me connected to the game a little bit.
And I love that, Matt, because we touched on that earlier, where you get the opportunity to tell a kid, like, hey, you have the tools, let's refine it. And I know, like, I see the smile on your face now, and I know that has to mean the world to you to see somebody know they have a special talent and to help them harvest that wherever it goes.
My friend, and I'll throw it out there, it's an organization called KT Prep that my buddy started going back 6 or 7 years now. He's one of my best friends from high school, and played college, played professionally in arena football, and he started training kids when he was done, and got me and a couple other guys involved, Maurice Drew, Demetrius Williams, guys that were De La Salle guys that went on to play, and there's others as well. But he's built up this amazing organization where we use football as kind of a tool where we're saying, hey, here's all these talented kids. Let's give them this information, this knowledge, technique, knowledge of the game that we learned as professionals. They can apply it as high school kids, right? And hopefully give them a leg up to have opportunities going forward. And there's a lot of things that have come out of that in terms of, hey, these kids don't just need football knowledge. They need academic support. They need guidance in terms of, hey, you're a great athlete, a Power 5 prospect, but how do you get yourself academically in order to be able to take advantage of that opportunity? And so Nathan's developed a tutoring program. We have professionals that come in and help the kids, and then we're able to raise money and take the kids to competitions. Obviously not during COVID, but in other times to different cities to compete against great talent around the country. And then also, more importantly, to get them on college campuses in those cities to see what that experience is like, maybe to develop a vision of themselves being in a place like that when maybe they wouldn't have had an opportunity to do so otherwise. Having done it, started doing it maybe 6-7 years ago, we're getting to the point now where we're actually seeing some of our kids, get drafted, become stars in college, and kind of, go on through the process. So, being able to see that, and hey, we're not the reason that those guys are having success, whether it's, just in life and business and college or some of these athletes moving on, but knowing that, for a snapshot in time, we were a part of their lives, and maybe offered a couple things that helped them along the way, and even staying in touch with those guys now and seeing what they're doing is really fulfilling.
How do you take a kid that you're guiding, and how do you get them to understand that it's not just about football, but that the academics and the post-football life, that's just as important, if not more?
Talking is one thing and trying to tell them is one thing, but doing and trying to create opportunities for them to get exposure, I think just really goes a long way. We try to coach them and give them the information. But as an example, the organization brought in 4 entrepreneurs from the Bay Area, guys that have started tech companies. One guy started an apparel company. Another guy's worked at Bain and worked with a bunch of worked with venture capital firms. These guys are my age, So, I mean, the stories that you hear of a guy moving out from the Northeast and living in an apartment in San Francisco with 5 buddies, can't hard to bring a date over. Just the crazy stories these guys tell, just so they could pursue the dream of starting a company, and they've been successful, right? These guys are 35, 36, maybe they're on their 2nd or 3rd company. They're CEOs, they're running businesses, impactful pillars of the community. To bring people like that in and have kids that maybe don't know anybody like that, or maybe they've seen somebody like that on Instagram or on the news, but they've never gotten a chance to speak with them. And our organization created opportunity where these guys come in with just a small group of 10 or 15 of our kids. And they worked out with them first. They trained with them, socially distanced, of course, and then moved into to more of like a breakout session, and then in small groups where you have guys that are 15, 16, 17. Many of them are very talented athletes that will play Division I college football, having a chance to pick these guys' brains and say, hey, how did you do it? How did you survive some of the hard times? How did you manage some self-doubt in your world? How can I take that and apply that to myself as a student athlete and, maybe eventually as a business person? It was so awesome. I went and sat and, tried to experience some of it, and just to see the engagement with our kids and to see them kind of come alive and the questions they were asking. And, the truth is those guys, maybe wouldn't have the courage or the opportunity to seek out that information if that environment wasn't created. I think doing things like that, getting kids on college campuses where maybe they've never been before, maybe they don't have a family member that's been to college before, and seeing other guys that, look like them, come from the same circumstances, are athletes like them, and say, hey, I can do this too. I do belong here. I think those experiences are so impactful. And then, whatever knowledge and hot air that we spill on them is just a little bit extra.
That's such a unique perspective, Matt, because I don't recall anybody or any camp that I went to growing up. I don't recall anybody bringing in a business owner or somebody just unrelated to the game and coming to speak with you in small groups saying, hey, this is great. This is what I do. This is how you can do it. I mean, that exposure and that experience, I think that when you see that firsthand, that gets your wheels churning and you're like, wait a second, like I can do this too and be successful playing football.
Yeah, it was awesome. And, that's just one example of some things that the organization has been able to do. But, I think, we've talked about the mentality of athletes and how it relates to, outside of sports. And for the kids, these guys come in, they don't recognize them, right? It's they don't know who they are. And then they hear their story and the success that they're having in business. And I remember the guys are talking about how they're all friends and they support each other almost like teammates, even though they're in different businesses. And so they're saying like, hey, we go out and we work out together, right? And when we work out together, they're like competing. They're talking trash to each other. One guy's picking the hardest hill to run up to, and he gets up first and he's talking trash as the other guys are bringing up the rear, and in a constructive way, right? They're challenging each other to grow and hold each other accountable. And, those are things that the young student athletes can relate to. And so they're like, and even for me, I'm like, wow, these guys aren't different than us, right? We're the same. We're just applying these things in different areas. And so it's all possible for us.
We always kind of go back to that blue collar, the beginnings and the humble mindset and just grinding things out. Do you think you would still be where you are today? Because you could have gone the other way and been like, you know what? I'm not getting my opportunity. I'm out.
Maybe that works for some people. Maybe it would. I just don't know. I was never taught to think like that. And I just don't. I think there's absolutely value in being rational and like we said, maybe, trying to keep perspective. But as far as, running away from a challenge or an obstacle or, I just don't see the value. And again, going back to the game, right? It's like, if there's time on the clock, we're in the game, there's a chance to win, right? That's why you're playing. And, I feel like it's the same thing outside of sport, right? Like, we're here. It's a tough time right now in the world for a lot of people, but we're in the game. And I think definitely, having developed that mindset, and I've all the credit to my parents for instilling that in me and my brother at a young age. I just don't know if I could see things any other way. And of course, my resolve has, like anybody, you go through things in life and sometimes it's really high and sometimes you're hanging onto a thread going, there's a glimmer of hope that we can turn this around. But I just try to keep on moving forward and be positive and optimistic. And I tend to find that I enjoy life a lot more with when I look at things that way.
The foundation that your parents laid for you is fantastic. I mean, to get you to mold your mindset to be that way, because you're right. You're going to experience highs, you're going to experience lows, and it's just about how do you navigate those? Because it's easy to go one way to the left, one way to the right, but doing it right in the middle, in a way, just taking a deep breath, that's something that I admire about you, Matt, and I've really enjoyed kind of diving into, because it's important. And I think a lot of these kids, if they kind of understand how to do that, again, it comes down to them. Sky's the limit, whether it's on the field or off.
I appreciate you saying that. And, my coach Bob Lattisaur, I remember him talking with me, when I was a young quarterback at De La Salle, saying, hey, there's a lot of emotion involved in this game, but most great quarterbacks are really even keeled. You can't get too high or low because the games are long and things are going to be up and down, and people are going to be looking to you for some stability. And I learned that again from him, but I also witnessed that even going up to the highest level. Watching guys that will be in the Hall of Fame as athletes and have had many successes and many great triumphs, but not saying they're not exuberant. They're excitable and they enjoy what they're doing, very passionate, but they have the ability to not get too high or low and lose focus on, what the goal is ahead, and which I try to learn from and implement in my life.
I love it. The perspective, hearing about the Michigan days. I mean, when you kind of painted that picture, Matt, of the bus, your first game, it's almost like I could see it. And I think that's the visual. That's what I want people to get from the podcast. I want them to kind of, it's almost like they're sitting right next to you on this journey, right? All the way from the beginning in Concord, at De La Salle, all that success, Michigan, grinding it out, Idaho State, the whole deal. And now, commercial real estate at CBRE. And I think they have a headquarters, or they have an office in Irvine, because I'm from Irvine originally.
They have offices all over the world. I think we have one here in Newport Beach. Downtown LA is a big office. And they actually just announced that they're shifting the headquarters to Dallas, Texas, which has been our biggest office in the U.S. for some time. But yeah, they have a presence all over, and I haven't seen all the offices, but hopefully, I really enjoyed living and traveling to other places, in my sports career and in business. So hopefully there'll be more of that ahead.
Well, they got to get you set up at the Pocatello office, right?
Right. I'm not sure how many skyscrapers are going up in Pocatello. I don't know if they'd like that much, but I have seen some of my former teammates up in Pocatello, actually guys that were from California, have become a huge part of the startup community up there in Idaho, which one wouldn't really think was a hotbed, but these guys are doing some great things and kind of putting Pocatello on the map.
10 years from now, where do you see yourself?
Hopefully just enjoying life with my family and friends, and getting to spend a ton of time and experience things with the people that I'm close to now, and also hopefully a lot of new friends and extended family. I just I think the more years and more experiences that we have, it becomes more apparent. And my parents are getting into their 60s now, and my dad had a birthday the other day, and I called him in the morning. I said, hey, any words of wisdom? 63 years old, and he's like, hey man, keep it simple. Spend time with the people that you care about and that you enjoy being around, and life will be good. So. I'm still as driven as ever for, competing and success and, some of the endeavors that I'm in. But I think hopefully, 10 years from now, getting to do a lot of that and having a greater appreciation for some of those things, hopefully.
I love it, Matt. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat and to take us from the infancy of Matt Gutierrez to where we are now. I wish you nothing but success, my friend. Go Blue. And again, really appreciate the time.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you for having me, and always go Blue.
For more interesting stories with former athletes, check out Hey Where'd You Go on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and a video version on YouTube. Plus, check it out on social media. That's Colin Kushner on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.